If you've ever wondered why the world has become so damn crazy, it's not the people per se, it's the circumstances they're in making them that way. Hey, here it is Monday, and I hope you had a good weekend. Mine wasn't worth a damn, but who knows, maybe it will improve. I wanted to jump right into something that is really going to be controversial. So, bearing that in mind, if you are weak of heart, constitution, or conviction, this may not be the episode for you. But if you have the courage of your convictions and just a little bit of intellectual honesty, stick around and, if anything, well, you'll probably be entertained. Now, here is the first statement that I wanted to make to start this off. A homogeneous population is a group of individuals that shares a uniform composition, meaning its members are similar in key characteristics such as culture, ethnicity, beliefs, and other traits. This uniformity leads to common ground amongst residents, fostering strong social networks and community ties. The exact opposite of homogeneous is heterogeneous. So it stands to reason that if a homogeneous society leads to a common ground amongst residents, fostering strong social networks and community ties, what do you think a heterogeneous society leads to? Here's a hint. It's not rainbows, peace, and universal love. It's the fragmented and dysfunctional society we have today. We, by and large, live in a world of the heterogeneous society, and at least in America, have been living that way for the last 60 years. So, with that in mind, that's where I'm taking off from. I'm going to say a whole bunch of things that, well, frankly, might piss a lot of people off. But you're not here for the same old boring nonsense, and I don't want to give it to you. So I'm just going to tell it like it is, the way I always do. Have you ever made wine yourself at home? Have you ever actually made wine, and maybe the big 5-gallon cask, and you have to rotate it and all that. It's a whole procedure to making wine. Or perhaps at least if, you're familiar with the principle, what it is simply, adding a bunch of, some kind of sugared juice, maybe grape juice, what have you, and some yeast, and it starts to ferment. And generally speaking, without going into a whole bunch of boring technical jargon, it ferments up, and you eventually end up with what we know as wine. And typically, that has an alcohol content somewhere around, give or take, 12 to maybe 15% alcohol. That's really pushing it. Typically somewhere, around maybe 11 to 13%, let's say. Now, the reason for that is that literally the yeast do an incredible job of just eating and reproducing. And I mean, they're just it's gang sex on a level, you couldn't even imagine. But anyway, they do their job. They do it really well. There's a huge environment. They got plenty of food, plenty of room to swim around. Everything is fine and Jake and all that until it isn't. Because quite literally, the fermentation process stops, not so much necessarily because they've run out of food, although by then most of the sugar has been consumed, but because they literally die in their own excrement that they produced which is the alcohol. Well, you could sort of kind of use that same analogy of where we are as a human species on the planet. Because, yeah, things started out pretty much really good. And this is where we are now as far as just the bare bones of existence are concerned. You see, let me just segue off of this just a bit, but hopefully it will make a sociological point. You see, in America, all those many years ago, when there was all of this endless talk about freedom, and this, of course, spilt over into, well, religious freedom. And there was this guy, um, Joe Smith. I can't remember if he was actually the founder. I think he was, of the Mormon Church. Okay. So, most people, this is a very long story short, and I recognize that I may be butchering this, but again, it's for illustrative purposes. But the point is that just about everyone hated Mormons. Yeah, when the religion was invented, they hated them and thought they were crackpots for whatever reason. They just didn't like them, didn't want anything to do with them, didn't want to be around them, and that was that. And very long story short, the government steps in and says, okay, you crazy fucks, tell you what, you guys want to do your crazy polygamy thing and all this other shit you want to do that nobody likes. You can go out way out west to what eventually, to the state of Utah. And, basically that'll be your place. You guys can get your crazy on with, with your thing of Mormonism. You could do your thing and you leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. Go ahead, do your crazy, out of sight, out of mind. Do it. And that was more or less the way it worked out. And it has to this day. Now, say what you want about Mormonism or the state of Utah. I have been to Utah many times. I have been to many cities and towns within Utah. And I can tell you, at least in my opinion, for the most part, I'm certainly not saying there aren't some very nice places there, and there are. But by and large, it's a godforsaken hellhole. And I sure as hell wouldn't want to live there. Again, okay to visit. You go to certain places, but nah, sure as hell don't want to live there. But that's me. So, but at any rate, those people, they had a place as a homogenous group. If they're, were crazy, at least they could be all crazy fucking together. And for the longest time, yeah, they could be over there and do whatever it is they do. And again, out of sight, out of mind. Okay. But like everything else in every society, that only goes so far as, as it will, as far as population and encroachment is concerned. Now, for the longest time, and even to the present day, there's still not, people aren't head over heels, crazy, can't wait to get to Utah and to be around, Mormonism. Some may, but, by and large, nah. So, but the point is that they had their place and they still have their place because at least here in America, just about everybody knows that most of the folks and the vast majority of people in Utah, especially if you're in Salt Lake City, are Mormon or excuse me. They don't like to be called that anymore. because of the whole polygamy thing and all that shit. So they're Latter-day Saints. Excuse me, pardon me. Okay. But anyway, um, yeah, people are fully aware of this. And it hasn't been like, the government and the army and the army, the armed forces hasn't stepped in to shut them down or anything like that, simply because it's, pretty isolated and godforsaken. Same thing for Wyoming. I mean, it is probably one of the, at least in the continental United States, it's one of the most, isolated, sparsely populated places in the U.S. And so, yeah, you're just one of those people that really want to be by yourself, or I don't know, you're kind of a person, people hating kind of person, and you really, really want to be away from people. Wyoming's your place. Yep, that's where you want to go. But for the rest of us, and approximately 80% of the population is, east of the Rockies, way over here in the greater third of this country. They don't have that choice. That's mainly and mostly where the population is. So then you enter the whole population dynamic. Now, I'm going to jump over to another aspect of this whole thing just to set the record straight. Way, way, way back again, just at the arrival of the Industrial Revolution, the invention of steam, and then the discovery of oil, the eastern United States in particular literally exploded in population. And there's a million reasons for that, and they make logistical sense why this happened. But you have to bear in mind that all of those cities in the eastern part, and particularly on the East Coast, that had these huge populations, this happened not because it was such a wonderful place to live, which initially it was. It was quite beautiful. But the cities, New York City, Baltimore City, for instance, places like this were quickly filled up with row housing. The row housing was not put there to graciously accommodate the farmers that came to work in the cities. This wasn't the case at all. They were there, these row houses, which were cheap to build. It was strictly utilitarian. The idea was to get as many people as possible cramped into these shitholes, which were side by side and tenements and all of that, so that the owners of the various companies and factories and all that could maximize their profits from these people. And unlike prior to that, these people largely came from, very rural settings. They knew, hey, they're going to have, obviously, they're going to have babies, they're going to have youngins. So in these little row houses, they didn't care if you were cranking out, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 kids, like perhaps you were on the farm once upon a time, and it was pretty much your sole responsibility to provide and take care of them. They didn't care how many of you were cramped in these tenements. They were making money from you. And so, because of that, and this is where everything radically changed, it's been pretty much a spiral down this cesspool of what I call terribleness ever since. Because, simply put, people are not attuned to live that way. I don't give a damn what anyone says. I don't care about the professors and sociologists that say otherwise. And one of the biggest lies that has been perpetrated for many, many years is that, oh, humans are social creatures. Bullshit. We're not. What we are, what I would call at best, we are semi-social creatures. Um, it's people, your neighbors, they'll help you when they can or if they can, but and the same, hopefully you'll reciprocate for them. But by and large, they want to live alone in their own, well, little towns or on the farm or in their community. But we're not given that option today. We're not. So it's a non-option. So as you look at this background film, and this could be, I jumped all over the place just to illustrate with the photos, but look at the numbers of people. And all those people require, a relatively large amount of resources. And they're put in an artificial state, you might say, where, well, the living isn't pleasant at best. So fast forward to today, as an example. Most people, when you're young, I was once young, and I lived in those tenements and those row houses until I was, mid 20s. And I lived all up and down the East Coast, and I lived in Brooklyn, and and then the Bronx, and I'm thoroughly acquainted with neighborhoods there and the whole tenement living thing. Sometimes halfway decent, most of the time no. And the primary problem with it is, and I'm simply, I know I'm jumping around for just because, well, I don't have 3 hours to make this episode. But it was the joke back then. It used to be called the 3 F's of living there. You always knew, whether you wanted to or not, what your neighbors were doing. The 3 F's being fighting, fucking, or farting. Not necessarily in that order. But that was the whole thing, and what it's supposed to do for you when you're at that age is you quickly realize whatever company you're working for, or if you're trying to work your way up in the world, or whatever the case may be, you sure as shit don't want to live there. That's your whole goal, working your way out of this. And the big reward is supposed to be the suburbs. And let's not get me started on that living. But I'm saying, by comparison, as far as any semblance of relative peace, that's your next step up. That's it. But now you don't even have that. That's not even an option, because everything and everyone, because of the social stratification that I just spoke of, you don't have a choice of your neighbors at all. At all. I mean, for instance, if I happen to say that I am Scot-Irish, I grew up in a Scot-Irish neighborhood. We had enclaves, and that's the way it was. And we also had, Italian neighborhoods, and we had black neighborhoods and so forth, but they were very clearly defined. And there was multiple ways that, this was done. And this was done despite all of the rhetoric of racism and all the other horseshit that got passed down from the 60s. People figure out, they really do, as far as, what works socially. In the old saying, birds of a feather, it was true. And people, we got along. We got along because good fences made good neighbors. And I remember the forced, and that's exactly what it was. I remember the forced integration when all of this stuff started, when I was entering, elementary and grade school, let's say. And the integration was forced, and it was an absolute unmitigated fucking nightmare. And that's the only way to say it, at least for me. And everyone I knew and everyone across the city absolutely hated it. But thanks to the PR work from the Rainbow Coalition, it was forced upon us. We didn't have a choice. And that's what I'm talking about is taking place not only here in America, but in Europe. And God knows if there's a poster child in Europe for the absolute nightmare, the absolute social nightmare and degradation and everything conceivable that is wrong, it would be the UK. And that is really that is just a tragedy. It's just absolutely unspeakably horrible. So, but they're not alone. It's throughout all of Europe. And prior to, say, I don't know, this shit started in the mid 80s or what have you. But yeah, you had homogeneous areas, countries, the Netherlands and Norway, Denmark, Sweden, all these places. And people used to go and visit. I remember talking, it's older people, older guys talking, and they went to the famous thing. They went to Denmark and they went to Amsterdam and I said, oh man, and it's beautiful and it's clean and the people are really nice. And it's just going on and on and on. And yeah, in retrospect, they were, because relatively speaking, there were much lower populations, and those populations that were there were homogeneous. So I don't even, this is a much longer episode than I had intended. I don't want to wear your ear off with this, but maybe I can do a part 2 on this if you're interested. But I've been getting a lot of email from Europe, and I decided to put my 2 cents out there and kick these ideas out there. And I don't know, see what you guys think. Maybe, maybe you think I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, or maybe you can see where I'm coming from. But that is the current state, if you want to know. And this is not, of course, this is not the totality for all the reasons, but it is a huge, huge part of it. Because under the guise of, cultural diversity and all the other woke shit and all this other nonsense, when people are not allowed, I'm saying allowed, when they are not allowed to have their own identities and are supposed to feel ashamed of those identities, well, you end up with the nightmare that you currently have today. Anyway, I've really talked your ear off. Thank you for listening, and hopefully you'll put your 2 cents in and, drop a line and let me know what you think. Until next time, this is Ernest, and that's all I've got for today.